Good day, everybody. This is the Ecclesiarch here, back with some more Warpforge. And during my previous stream, you guys asked me to make a tier list. Now, this is not the best time to be making a tier list because the patch is coming out very soon. But then again, we will have a chance to compare this tier list with the new one that I will make post-patch. Now, before we begin, as always, please do not forget that this is my subjective opinion. You might disagree, you might have a different experience. And if you heavily disagree with my picks and how what arguments I make here, please make a comment on the video so that I have a chance to I have a chance to understand your point of view. Now, guys, don't forget that the S tier shall be preserved for the best decks, the ones that are considered like top of the meta. A are gonna be like really good. B are gonna be all right, like playable. C are gonna be underwhelming, and D are gonna be absolute trash. So, without further ado, let's get to the blue boys, the Ultramarines. Now, the Ultramarines are in a very awkward spot currently, and that is not because of the nerfs per se. I think that currently the Ultramarines were okay-ish. It's just that every other faction is kind of overtuned in its own way. Not every other faction, but a lot of other factions are kind of overtuned in their own way. And on top of that, currently in the meta, there are things that the Ultramarines struggle to take out. Specifically, it's the Orcs with armor, because most Ultramarine builds center around burst, and if the Orcs get the armor on, you just don't have enough resource to do that, especially considering two of their Warlords have a lot of card draw, and the Orc games often go to attrition, and you kind of sabotage yourself with card draw, right? They're not really that particularly good against Necrons or the Tau either, and they can end up struggling against Chaos too. Now, Uriel Ventris, you guys remember, was on top of the meta a while back, but EG decided to remove the extra card, which I totally disagree with, to be honest, because the Orc armor was already enough to push the Ultramarines out. So I think that extra card should return, which, however, though I think that it's kind of unlikely that they'll do that, but I still think that that was something that was good. But overall, this is what I think. Unfortunately, I have to put the Ultramarines from C to D tier, B tier, but I would put Varrotigeris into D. So the problem here is that it's not that the Ultramarines, once again, are a terrible faction, even though a lot of you will say that they are. It's just that currently the meta is in a way that it does not favor playing the Ultramarines. Khalgar and Uriel get a higher tier than Varro because at least Khalgar can be played for a more control deck, while Uriel can still push his aggro tactics and sometimes can take some wins, but Varrotigeris is currently in a very bad spot because there's really the gameplay style that he's made to be played, which is aggro, because of his Warlord power, for the most part, is weak, and the other way that he's usually played is vehicle, and that is also pretty weak. Now, that is not to say you can't get to legendary rank with him or something, but you're gonna have struggled really hard to play in the top 50 with this guy. So overall, Ultramarines are not in a good spot. Perhaps this is not because of the faction. This is, as I said, more because of the meta, and perhaps they need to think a little bit about the Warlords, but more on that in a separate video. The Orcs, however, are a different story, and our first most meta warlord, and actually the strongest warlord currently in the game, is going to be Ghazghkull Thraka. Now, Ghazghkull is undoubtedly the best warlord in the game, and if anybody doubts it, just think about the fact that last time the rank 1 was Ghazghkull, he played Ghazghkull, and currently I'm trying to sit on rank 1. It's early in the season, but I'm also playing Ghazghkull. So Ghazghkull is really good because he absolutely demolishes the Tau. He demolishes the Ultramarines. He's really good against the Tyranids. He's really good against everything else as well. There's only a few things that he can end up struggling against, a few Warlords, and those Warlords are not meta currently, so he's in a good spot because of that. Mostly this is because of his high health and armor that kind of helps him out tank everything, while also having like insane amounts of removal to deal with any threat, even like a board-wide threat that the Tau can actually do. So Ghazghkull undoubtedly deserves an S tier in my book. When it comes to Warboss Gordrang, now Warboss Gordrang is a tricky one indeed, because before the Tau he was in a very good spot, because in the mirror he can actually beat a lot of the other Orc warlords. The problem is that he's not particularly good against the Tau because a lot of Tau shit is flying, and his ability is kind of useless against flying, but that doesn't stop him from being like being able to play high aggro. This guy is underestimated. Not a lot of people are currently playing him, but I do consider him to be pretty good. He's just not good as Gaskell because Gaskell's ability is and extra HP is more suitable for dealing against the Tau. However, Warboss Gordrank himself can beat Gaskell. So that is one very big plus, mostly because of his high damage output and stun lock that he can do. So I would actually put Gordrank in A tier, even though I think some of you might disagree with this. Bottom of the A tier, but he still deserves to be in A tier. Now, the next two are Grok and Boss Zackstruck. Now, Boss Zackstruck is a very weird case, and he goes into B, and I'll explain why this is the case. Boss Zackstruck is arguably the best against the Tau out of all the others. Well, more specifically against the drone Tau, because he can fly and deal 3 damage, right? However, that is not enough to put him in the higher spot because there is a different problem. He is going to have more trouble against the suits, battle suits, compared to Warboss, Gordrank, and Gaskell Traka. And on top of that, he loses a duel against both Gordrank and Gaskell. Gordrank absolutely demolishes Zackstruck because he can stun lock you and your ability pretty much becomes useless and unusable because you depend on attacking with your Warlord to make that ability work. So you're basically playing without a Warlord power when you're playing against Gordrank. And against Gaskell, he just does not have enough punch to outdo Gaskell because Gaskell with his constant pressure of Grots and higher HP can deal with Zackstruck because those 1 damage Grots when both of you have the Grizzled Scarboy on make a difference. It's just that with Gordrank it's not enough of a difference because the Uja Choppa makes a big difference, if you know what I mean. Now with Grok is actually an interesting thing. He ranked really low in the meta report. I can understand that he's in the worst spot than he has ever been because he was always S or A tier from day one. Like he was really good always. But right now it's just that his gameplay style does not have any, let's say, synergy with the armor. Because all the other orcs do that better, and his Warlord ability kind of sabotages it. So let me explain what the problem is if you guys don't get it. When you're playing an orc mirror, the one who runs out of cards and goes into attrition first is in a big disadvantage. What is Grok's ability? It's to draw cards. So playing Grizzled Scarboy with him is not good because you go to attrition really quick. And with Grizzled Scarboy, a lot of orc games go into attrition. So you're always going to be losing that unless, once again, you don't want to play with your Warlord power. So the only way you can really play him is if you play a vehicle or aggro orc deck, which is subpar compared to everything else. However, I would still say that he is better than the Ultramarines simply because he's an orc. I would put him below Zackstruck, but it's simply because he's an orc. He gets the orc card pool, he gets all the cool stuff, and he can still do some damage, he can do some work, but the problem is that he's gonna be very subpar compared to all the other orcs, and unless you really get like super lucky with your nerfed Green Horde or something, you're not gonna be doing well. So there's that. Now then, on to the Eldar. Now, Eldar are, as always, in an interesting place. Zephyrblade, I would actually put in B tier, and I would place him above Grok, but below Zackstruck. Zephyrblade is really fun. BJ also posted a pretty fun deck, and nice one actually on top of that on Iliac Zephyrblade, very interesting one with Strike and Fade, and he can also deal with the Tau drones because of his ability. So he's not in a bad spot per se, but he's not in a great spot either, because once again the orcs are a hell to deal with even for Eldar, and Tau are still difficult to control even if you have the ability to take out the drones. As you guys basically see, there's like at least 4 warlords in lower tiers that can deal with drones, and there's at least 3 that can destroy the drones on turn 1, but that is not enough to put them higher above. It's just that Eldar are currently in a pretty okay spot. Their units are still good, even though their Hemlock was nerfed. So yeah, they're still alright, they're still playable. But Eliak is definitely not the best of their warlords, so he cannot really go into A tier. Now with Anvir Keltalk, he needs to join the others in the C tier. I would even say that he's kind of worse than the Ultramarines, honestly, because currently his gameplay is very slow. As you know, he plays for like heavy control where he has to do the reclaim the stars, but that is absolutely terrible against the orcs because you do reclaim the stars and they just gonna drop the Will of Gork on you. And against the Tau, it's not good because if you play passive turns against the Tau, you're gonna be screwed if they drop a lot of drones and stuff. And even if you clear the board, Tau have like a gazillion ways to rebuild the board. I think Keltalk currently is not in a good spot because he just cannot play to deal with all the big threats that are currently smacking the meta. However, I would still put Medreal Galen in tier 2. Now, Medreal Galen has always been really good, and the thing with her is that she plays the mid-range, which is, I think, currently the best way to play the Eldar, and the ability to summon units with Shuriken is a big deal. I actually lost 2 games against Galen with Gaskell. I have very few losses with Gaskell, and a few of them have been basically Medreal Galen, not the other Eldar, though. Every Keltalk I've met, it was way too oppressive in my favor. But Galen is actually still pretty good. She can deal with the Tau because she's very aggressive and she can really take them out because before they even get out of control with the huge amount of flanks and burst. Still not as good enough to be S tier, but definitely worthy of an A tier. I'm not sure which I would put in a higher tier between her and Gordrank, but I think Gordrank still edges because once again, he's an orc. So that is how the Eldar are currently doing. Oh boy, now it's Imhotep. Now Imhotep is my pain because as you guys know, it's my favorite warlord, one of at least, but he cannot go anywhere higher than B, but he's going to be on the top of the B tier and maybe you'll be surprised. I'll tell you what the whole thing with the Imhotep is. Now Necrons received a ton of nerfs, and one of the worst nerfs in the game that they've ever done, Everguild, I think, is reducing the HP for Lichguard. Reducing the damage was perfect, but reducing the HP was, I think, a very bad call. Because they kind of destroyed the whole, one of the main units that the Necron control gameplay was built upon. And that coupled with all the other, like, crazy amounts of nerfs that Necrons have actually received have pushed Imhotep out of his spot where he always used to be meta. But he's still good. That's the funny part. Now, the reason why he's good, actually, is not because, like, he's so overpowered, but it's because of the meta. One thing is that the Necrons struggle against the Tyranids, because ever since the Psychomancer change, they have nothing to stop the Tyranid stealth units, like literally nothing. So, well, mostly when you play against the Swarmlord, it's an auto loss with Imhotep. If you're playing against the good one, that is, unless they roll with a godforsaken terrible RNG. However, Imhotep is really good against the Orcs, especially Gaskell Thraka. So the thing with Imhotep is that he and Gaskell, when the game goes to attrition, Imhotep can actually end up outvaluing Gaskell because of all the late game units that he has, because of Tomb World, because of the fact that you can also play Conquering Tyrant. That kind of, if you play double, you basically forego his armor because you'll have 6 damage. And on top of that, he's also good at taking out some drones. He cannot rank any higher because there are still some problems. Mainly one of the problems is that he's not that good against the Battlesuit Tau, because the Battlesuit Tau kind of outvalue him. If you are still unlucky to face a Tyranid, you'll be at a disadvantage, and you're still at a disadvantage against the Black Legion, especially with the nerfed Lichguard, because Camouflage counters Imhotep hard. So he would still go on top of the B tier. Now, surprisingly, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, but Oricon also goes into B tier, and I'm still placing him above everything else. You guys are severely underestimating Oricon. The thing is that the Scarabs build is still disgusting, and it's still pretty powerful. The only problem with the Scarab build is that it's not good if the Orc has already done his Grizzled Scarboy. So that is the only problem. It's still as disgusting as it is. You can still get 8 Scarabs on turn 1 if you go second. So it's certainly not something to be underestimated. It's still pretty good. It's still pretty hard to deal with. It's just super obnoxious. And if you do end up playing against the Orcs, you can still win depending on how well the Orc draws and how well you draw, right? Because even though Orcs are using Squigs right now, one of the problem with that is that Squigs have 2 HP and Scarabs have 1 attack. So the chances of them suiciding those Squigs is not high. So overall, Oricon is still pretty good, and I think he's the sleeper pick currently. But it's not something that I really want to see on the ladder because it's disgusting to play against. Nemesor Zandrek, however, he goes into C tier. I'm not really sure how high he can go compared to Keltalk. Even I would even. Maybe I would place him actually above Keltalk or below. I'm just not sure. I think above because at least he has better chances against the Orcs than Keltalk. The extra card that they gave him did give him some punch. However, the buffs that they really gave Nemesor was stupid because no offense to anybody, because like extra card doesn't really do much for him. I can understand what they were pushing. They want him to play more infantry based, which is cool, and they increase the HP on the arc, but that doesn't solve his problems, right? I think what could solve his problems is if they made a special card, just like they have in Horus Heresy Legions. A lot of Warlords could actually become playable if they make special cards, but as I said, more on that in a future video. The problem with him is he cannot deal with the drones. He doesn't have like a spam ability like Oricon. He doesn't have a ping like Imhotep, and Necrons are not in the best spot, as I said, so Nemesor just cannot rank higher. Now, Abaddon. Abaddon definitely still goes into A tier, even though a lot of you might say that the Tau is an auto loss for Abaddon. I would say that is not the case. Depends on what kind of a Tau you're facing. If you're facing a battlesuit Tau, you can still win. If you're facing a drone Tau, you're in a bit of a pickle because your Spondum is kind of useless against them. But they're still good because they still have the ability to just one-shot you with a proper combo from stealth, and Tau aren't particularly tanky. Maybe Envy is a little bit, but not a little bit, quite a bit. But other than that, I think everything is doable for Abaddon. One little problem that, however, he has currently is that I think a lot of people are playing Black Crusade, and I honestly still think that it's not good. I think that not good. It's not that it's not good. I think mid-range is better because what's the point of Black Crusade when you know that the Orcs can just Will of Gork it, right? A lot of things are dictated by Will of Gork. And one of the reasons why I don't play Abaddon on Black Crusade myself is that I would say mid-range Abaddon that I used to use will probably perform a little bit better because it'll close out the game sooner. But then again, I guess it needs more testing, and I haven't really played a lot of Abaddon this season. I've been sitting on Gaskell because I'm trying to compete for a top spot. But I think I'm going to play some Abaddon this season as well because Gaskell is already starting to get very boring, honestly. But I still think that he's a really good Warlord. I think that he just gets a little bit pushed back because of the Tau once again, and because well, Orcs are all right because if you get Drachnian, you can still like bully them. And sometimes they just cannot have enough removal to deal with all your stuff. So it's really, really hard to kind of decide. Well, Buggy's Black Crusade deck is actually good because it's a mix of mid-range and late game. So it's a much more balanced version. So I don't know. I would still think that Abaddon is good. It's not that he's not as good as he used to be. Sylar Hexcorn, funny enough, is going to rank higher than Varo Tigurius because Sylar Hexcorn, well, he's from a better faction currently. That's one. And sometimes with good RNG, he can actually pull some things off because the small buffs that he's been receiving, on top of the fact that Chaos has stayed untouched for a while and have not received like any nerfs, really pushes him up a little bit. But once again, unreliable, pretty weak, RNG dependent, but sometimes can really go off if you get lucky. So he goes to the bottom of the C tier. Harken World Claimer will go to B. I think he is better than these guys. I'm not sure if he's better than Oricon. The problem with Harken Worldclaimer is that even though he can deal with the drones better, he still has only 2 AoE. So that means that he's still not able to take out drones. He has lower HP than Abaddon. In order to do the mark of the Gift of Chaos or Dark Pact or whatever it is, he has to attack face. So he's usually very squishy. He's an okay warlord. He's definitely fine, but he'll never be Abaddon's level with the current setting of things. They need to make some changes either to him or to Chaos in order to push him up. Other than that, he'll always remain like one step behind Abaddon. Now we're talking about the Tyranids, and the Tyranids honestly are in an awkward spot. Swarmlord, who used to be one of the best warlords, is currently struggling like crazy. And the reason for that would be the Tau, once again, and the Orcs. I'm not even sure where to put this guy. Put him in C tier or put him in B tier. I'm actually reluctant to say I'm putting Swarmlord in C tier, but I have to say it because currently the problem is you play against the Tau, you end up against Commander Mazos, he drops a drone, a marker drone, and you lose the game because you have one ranged attack. It's going to take you 3 turns to take it out. And then he starts stacking that marker light and he's going to blow you up. It's very, very difficult to deal with the Tau as Swarmlord. It's just his ultimate counter, you could say. So Swarmlord, even though he doesn't need any buffs, he's a very good warlord. Arguably, when it comes to like Tyranids, he's like one of the best. But the meta is currently telling him, sorry mate, but you gotta stop. And he's bad against the Orcs as always, so there's also that problem. And joining this legendary warlord is another legendary warlord, the Terror of Vandergast, and unfortunately the only thing he's going to be terrorizing is your ranked points because he's the worst warlord in the game currently, goes below Tigurius. Now you might ask, but what the hell? Unlike Swarmlord, he can fly and he can attack the drones, but that's the problem. He needs to waste, once again, 2 energy to do that. But now you're going to say, but wait, Zagstruk also needs 2 energy to do that. Well, there's a difference. Zagstruk, first of all, gains 1 armor during that. He can also use it to gain even more survival when he has Scarboy, and he's an Orc. He gets the Orc card pool once again, and because of the Orc card pool, he's so good against the Tau. That's the saving grace for Zagstruk currently. If he was not an Orc warlord, if he was from another faction, I'd put him in D tier once again. And think about it. You play the Vandergast and you play into Warboss Gordrang, like, have fun fighting Gordrang with Terror of Vandergast. He's going to stun lock you. Gaskell is going to beat you. So there's really nothing that this guy can do. He has like no swarm synergy whatsoever. Well, before you go crazy, by synergy I mean his ability. Yeah, his ability like gives him attack, but he doesn't help help his troops anyway. So the only thing he can do is you can swarm and you can make 1 big attack and that's it. So it's not that good. All you really rely on is you gotta make a big swarming board and suddenly put the Bloodthirst on yourself, and with that combo you deal a lot of damage. But that's the only thing you can do. So unlike, for example, Tervigon, he doesn't have that much of a swarm synergy where Tervigon can constantly generate units and have something for overwhelming swarm. He has no synapse synergy whatsoever. So he's pretty much crap. I understand that the whole idea is that he's supposed to be that warlord that when you swarm the board gets strong, but how are you going to do that? You're probably not going to do that with the current meta. It's hard as it is to swarm the board in this game, unless you're playing specific factions, because everything gets removed every moment you play it, and especially when there are orcs in the game, you're not going to have a very big board stick around. So overall, this guy goes into a very, very awkward spot. Now, Neurothrope, on the other hand, will go on the top of the B tier. He's, in my opinion, he's better than Imhotep. The thing with him is that he can ping the drones instantly, which is good. He can play more of a late game control, and with Synapse Node, he can actually generate more and more value, which puts him in a better spot against the Orcs. Swarmlord could technically do that as well, and as I said, he would rank much higher. If there was no Tau, I would put him in A tier, like no problem. He could, well, A tier or top of the B tier at least, right? Still considering the Orcs. But Neurothrope, I think, is in an okay spot for sure. He's underestimated. People just don't want to play him a lot. because he was out of meta for a long time, but he can be pretty good. I think that his control deck is definitely fine. He's good, but once again, he's like Emotech. He's gonna win you a lot of games, but he's gonna lose you a lot of games as well. I think he's just a little bit better than Emotech currently, simply because the Necrons are nerfed hard. Tervigon is a tricky thing. I could put him in A tier, and I think I'm gonna put him in A tier. He's still pretty good. The main problem, once again, are the drones. But unlike Swarmlord, he can actually deal 2 damage to them, which is all right. But the main thing that he still has the overwhelming swarm cheese, which is dumb, because you just do double overwhelming swarm on energy 4 and the enemy just loses. And if you're gonna say, but what about the orcs? Well, Tervigon actually is very good against the orcs. The reason for that being, he can constantly generate unending value, which means that Gaskell just eventually loses, because he just runs out of answers, right? So Tervigon is probably the best Tyranid Warlord currently. Funny enough, because he used to be the worst Warlord together with maybe Nemesor and Hexcorn. But yeah, he's in a good spot right now, but not the best spot, once again, because Tau are dictating the meta, unfortunately, and as well as the Orcs. So the only big saving grace in terms of putting him A is what I mean, is that he's really good against the Orcs. So there's that for sure. Now, on to the big bad boys of the current meta, which are the Tau, Shadowsun, Onva, and Omesos. And I actually want to go this like in a like mixed up way. I'll start from Onva. I'm gonna put him on top here. I think he's the best Warlord currently after Gaskell Traka. He's certainly like really good. I think the main thing that makes Onva very good is that he has durability, survivability, he can cast shields, he can give armor to his units, which is crazy in a control matchup. He can play drones, and he can play battlesuits as well. The battlesuit Onva is particularly good. It's just that Onva's problem is that he gets mopped by a good Gaskell, basically. But that doesn't mean like he's constantly gonna lose, but in most cases, Onvas are gonna lose to Gaskells. He does have a really good finisher as well, but there's the thing. I don't think there's any other Warlord, not Warlord, but faction that can really stomp Onva other than Gaskell and maybe Gordrang. Every other Warlord is also not that good. He's currently, I think, one of the strongest Warlords. And I'm actually going to put Omesos up there as well. And some people say that perhaps not, because the Orcs exist once again, but there is a different problem with Omesos. I think currently the amount of Omesos players that I've faced, most of them really have incomplete collections. They don't have for the greater good, which is really important. That puts frontline on your Warlord, that basically protects you from all the bomb squigs. With flank, you also do get the shield on your drones, and if you draw that early, it's absolutely obnoxious. He can rebuild the board a gazillion times. The problem with Omesos is the following. He's not as good as Onva, in my opinion. Onva has way more chances against the Orcs, but Omesos is the Warlord that is dictating the meta currently. Why? Because unless you're a Warlord that can deal with drones, you're screwed. Because play Swarmlord against Omesos, right? You're gonna have a lot of fun. Like, play something without a ping against that, and you're already having problems, right? Onva, even though he doesn't have pings, it's just that he can outvalue Omesos because everything he plays is more durable than what Omesos has. And Tau also have a lot of stealth units, so they do have comeback mechanics as well. So he can beat Omesos for sure, but that's the problem. If the Orcs get nerfed next patch, you can enjoy seeing only Omesos on the ladder. I mean, Orcs need to get nerfed, but they also need to do something about the drones, because I think it's super toxic. I don't know if what people are suggesting is the best idea with the HP, but I don't know, man. Like, 3 HP flying units is for a lot of factions obnoxious. And sometimes the ping even doesn't help itself, because let's say you're playing a Neurotrope, right? And you're taking out the drones. The problem with the Tau is that they can build the board from scratch like every single time. Like every turn they can be dropping like 3 things, 4 things, 5 things when they play in not battle shoes, but when they play drones. Once I have like all the cards for him, I'm missing the experimental drones and for the greater good. Those are the legendaries that I'm missing. I'm gonna do a video on these guys, and maybe I can show you just how terrifying the drones can be, unless they get nerfed. So I think this guy still deserves S tier. Shadow Sun, I would put up into the A tier. Still pretty good, still pretty strong. I think he's just subpar compared to the others. I would say perhaps not better than Gordrang. No, a bit better than Gordrang, because once again, as I said, Gordrang is not that good against Tau as the other Orc Warlords, because his ability is kind of wasted. However, it can also be pretty scary, because if you get Makari from the start, dealing 5 damage to a Tau Warlord can also be a big thing, because you kind of out aggro them, right? But Shadow Sun is also pretty good. One of the main reasons why Shadow Sun has a problem is because of the Tau offense card, which is really good against Shadow Sun. I think once people unlock the anti-Onva offense card, it's gonna change things, but it's so far down the Tau Forge that might as well forget about that. Anyway, gentlemen, this is, I believe, what the tier list currently looks like. So once again, please leave a comment if you disagree, and Ecclesiarch out.